We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Markeith Floyd, should be sentenced to death.
I'm facing the legislature for something I have absolutely don't know nothing about. And they framed me.
5 most brutal killers reacting to death sentences. This is the story of Michael Edward Brady, the ruthless man who planned a vicious prison break that took the lives of 4 correctional officers, injured many others, and rocked North Carolina to its depths in 2017. Michael E. Brady was previously arrested on the 13th of February 2013 for shooting at a police officer, Michael J. Potts, during a routine traffic stop. He had been asked to pull to one side of the road because he didn't have his seatbelt on, but Michael didn't like that. So, as the unsuspecting police officer approached Michael's car to question him, Michael pulled out his gun and rapidly shot Potts in his face, right shoulder, and both of his hands, making a total of 4 shots. Despite the injuries, Potts was able to return to his car to report the crime, and he also described Michael and the car he drove. Following that, Michael was arrested, charged with assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill and inflicting serious injury, and sentenced to 24 years in prison. While in prison, Michael was not pleased with the fact that his freedom had been taken away from him, so he planned a prison break with 4 other prisoners like him after spending only 3 years in jail. But before that, he had gotten himself a job at the sewing plant in the prison for being on his best behavior. Little did the correctional officers know that this was only a part of Michael's plan to escape from prison. In fact, the tools he got from the sewing plant had been the major reason he was brave enough to attempt a prison break, as he used them to take down all the obstacles that stood in his path, including 4 correctional officers. And on the 12th of October 2017, Brady and his accomplices acted out their grand escape. They used hammers and other makeshift weapons to attack the guards, causing chaos, destruction, and death throughout the facility. Things got even bloodier in no time as Brady, once again, assumed the position of a murderer as he brutally stabbed one of his victims 65 times and hit another, George Howe, so hard that a prosecutor compared it to busting concrete, and one of the witnesses described it as a bloodbath.
I stabbed him like 4 to 8 times. I hit Jeffrey Howe until he stopped moving. I don't know how many times I hit him with a hammer.
Then he attempted to hop on a fence to complete his escape, but was captured at gunpoint and charged in court. During the trial, the prosecutors argued that Brady was the mastermind of the prison break and the murders that followed it. Brady didn't deny any of these claims and even said that he'll tell the truth to the court regardless of whether it hurts or helps him. However, he denied claims about him being crazy, described murder as another form of death, and agreed that his freedom was more important than the lives of others during his questioning. Found guilty on all charges, he was sentenced to death right after the judge accepted the jury's recommendation. Through his trial, Brady had an unnerving smile plastered on his face, but on hearing his sentence, he drained his face of all emotion. He now sits in Colorado, awaiting the day of his death. Next up, we have Nico Jenkins, a name that sends shivers down the spine of many Nebraskans. In 2013, he terrorized the state in a killing spree that lasted just 10 days, leaving 4 innocent people dead. Surprisingly, this was only 1 month after his release from the youth correctional facility he had been in for 10 years. He had been involved in carjacking and assault at the age of 15 and was put in a correctional facility with the expectation that he'll become a better person as soon as his sentence was over. However, that was not the case, as Jenkins went on a rampage and brutally murdered 4 people, including his jailmate at the correctional center and 3 other individuals who do not have a personal relationship with him, according to reports. However, the jury argued that the murders were purposeful and that the victims had been pre-selected.
Each one of these murders was a deliberate and planned act. The victims were pre-selected and the murders were purposeful.
So, he was handed a death sentence by the jury, which thought it was only appropriate to have the life snuffed out of the unrepentant murderer before he took more lives that were never his to begin with. All through this, Jenkins had a violent and adamant look on his face, and during the trial, he made several bizarre statements and even went as far as speaking a strange language, saying that all of his actions were for the Egyptian god of chaos, Apophis, who supposedly whispers in his ear and eggs him on to commit suicide. As basic as this may seem, it wasn't as simple to nail Jenkins as the brain behind the 4 murders, as he blatantly denied all of them, feigning ignorance and asking seemingly innocent questions, even in the face of so much evidence against him. On the 30th of July, 2019, Martez Abram committed a heinous crime that shocked the nation. It all started when Abram was fired at his workplace, Walmart, in South Haven, Mississippi. In desperation and panic, he took out a knife he had on him and started showing it to other members of staff. This only lasted for a while as Abram went out of the store, only to return armed with a semi-automatic rifle. As soon as he got into the store, he began shooting indiscriminately in all directions and held over 60 individuals who were in the store at that time as hostages. Also, he set the baby section of the store on fire and planted a bomb just outside the store for the bomb squad to deal with as soon as they arrived. By the time he was finished, he had injured a lot of people and killed 2 innocent people, Brandon Gales and Anthony Brown, both of whom had been Walmart employees before their deaths. The rampage continued as the police began a search for Abram and found him in the parking lot, where he again shot a police officer who was thankfully putting on a bulletproof vest.
Once I got out of my vehicle, I heard gunshots and I felt the pressure of the bullet hit my back.
Abram was then shot, treated at a hospital, and then charged to court. During his hearing, Abram was completely out of control as he kept his hands to his head, weeping as he answered yes to all of the questions he was asked, without giving them a thought. So, he was charged with 2 counts of murder and multiple counts of aggravated assault, and the judge decided his fate. However, Abram was not the only person weeping during his hearing. Anthony's lover tearfully read her victim impact statement as she told the court that Abram killed Anthony on the same day that they had their first date 20 years ago.
He took Anthony from me on the exact day 20 years earlier that we had our first date.
One of the victim's relatives had also recounted how she tried to communicate with Anthony Brown just before he took his last breath, with tears in her eyes. Sadly, Martez wasn't the only criminal that was on a rampage. Markeith Lloyd, a man with a long criminal history, became the center of a media frenzy in late 2016 after committing a string of heinous crimes in Orlando, Florida. The 44-year-old was wanted for the murder of his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Sade Dixon, and the killing of a police officer, Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. A month after his crime, he went into a Walmart store to shop, and shortly after that, Lieutenant Deborah Clayton had pulled into the store, grabbed a cart, and proceeded to search for Lloyd under the guise of shopping. They crossed paths a few times, but Lieutenant Clayton may not have noticed him until she got a notice from outside. She tried to approach and arrest Lloyd, but a shootout began, and he killing her in the process and ran away from the store. The hunt for Lloyd lasted for 9 days until he was finally apprehended, beaten up by the cops so badly that he lost one of his eyes, and he was finally brought to trial for his crimes. The trial began in May 2019, and Lloyd acted as his own attorney, which added to the already dramatic proceedings. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions and even went so far as to accuse the police of framing him. He frequently disrupted the proceedings and made outrageous claims, causing the judge to remove him from the courtroom multiple times. He denied all of the charges against him, claiming that all of the shots he fired and the things he did were just his reaction to the situation he was faced with. Lloyd did not react when Lieutenant Clayton's sister was tearfully giving her victim impact statement, saying that Clayton had been the only mother figure in her life after the death of her biological mother. He didn't even budge as his sentence was read aloud to the court, at least not until he heard that he had been given a death sentence.
She stood in the place as my mother when I didn't have one. I truly miss my sister. I truly miss her.
He mouthed a few things to the court, then blames other people for trying to kill him, and this continued until the judge suggested that he be removed from the court. Markeith Lloyd's behavior during the trial and sentencing showed a complete lack of remorse and disrespect for the justice system, making him a prime example of the worst kind of criminal there could ever be.
And I was just reacting, Mary. I was just reacting. Even when they opened the door, I just reacted. I fired 2 shots, I just reacted.
On January 28, 2014, another gruesome murder took place in Waynesville, Ohio, which left the small town reeling with shock and horror. 19-year-old Austin Myers, along with another teenager, Timothy Mosley, plotted and killed their 18-year-old friend, Justin Back, in cold blood. Myers and Mosley had gone to Back's house and attempted to rob his father's safe, but Back put up a fight, asking them why. Instead of answering his questions, Myers and Mosley decided to take his life. They strangled him with a choke wire, and according to them, it made their job easier as they didn't want to make a mess. They then stabbed him 21 times until his death, and all through this ordeal, Justin Back pleaded for his life and once again asked them why they were doing what they did. After Back's death, they proceeded to search the house and finally found the safe that they killed him for. Unfortunately for them, the safe was locked. but they found a handgun, which they used to shabbily clean up the crime scene before they fled in Mosley's car. The two murderers were apprehended after Back's father, Cates, returned home to find out that his handgun, safe, and son had gone missing. He informed the police, who began their search and were able to discover the crime and link them to Mosley and Myers, who had visited Back's house with the same car that they had fled with. Following the arrest, they were charged to court, where the prosecutors argued that the murder was premeditated, and the teenagers had even made a checklist of the things they needed for the killing. In court, however, Mosley testified against Myers, naming him as the mastermind of the crime in exchange for a plea bargain. So Mosley got a life sentence, while Myers got a life sentence for aggravated murder. Surprisingly, the one who killed didn't want his life to be taken. Myers desperately tried to bargain for his life, saying that his death would only cause more pain to more families and that he could do more good than that. The victim's father had none of that, and he frankly told Myers that he hated him. Remember, they did this for nothing, but the law is never tired of serving justice.